about DataRobot. So super excited to dive in.
All right, let's get started. So we're gonna have a pretty quick agenda for everyone here. We won't spend too much time in the slideware. We'll start off by talking about the acquisition and really what it means for you. And I'll have Gonzo speak to that. And then I'll jump into an overview of Zepl, talking about the different types of users that we typically serve within inside of Zepl. And then of course we'll get to the fun stuff and we'll dive into a demo.
All right. So when we think about Zepl, what I would hope everybody considers is that this pipeline of getting to productive AI and getting to an augmented intelligence deployment that can actually help improve systems or processes inside of a business. The first step is going to be to develop those things, and often historically, as a data scientist, I thought that developing things or playing around with things was my job, and obviously that has matured. But what has not changed much over the last several years is that at least half a decade now, we're talking about notebooks. And notebooks, I have mixed feelings about notebooks generally, but when a notebook situation is constructed in such a way that best practices are enforced and you can be lazy about it, like that is delightful. And I feel very strongly that is what Zepl's created. And so when we're talking about creators, specifically data scientists and data engineers, and then to a smaller extent business analysts and software developers, but specifically data engineers and data scientists, notebooks are a phenomenal rapid prototyping environment. And they make a lot of sense because it's a great way to have a native experience with data frames next to code. And that's really what we're talking about when we're talking about these types of creators in the ML ecosystem. And to that point, often why you want to be so close to code plus data is because you're doing data set authoring, right? You're iteratively consuming multiple resources. You're doing feature engineering, you're pairing things or joining things together because the data set, like most data sets, comes to you as kind of a pile of things like, hey, we have data here and there and everywhere. And so as you're turning that pile of data into a data set that could be machine ready, that is AI compatible, you need to iterate quickly. And often you're using some type of API. This could be a true REST API, right? As in the case of interfacing with our platform through an API. But this think also abstract, like scikit-learn is an API. It has an interface that we're all very comfortable with. Keras is another API that we're much more comfortable with, and we'd rather use that than TensorFlow, without Keras as a wrapper. And so all this means that we can do rapid prototyping. With Zepl, it's collaborative. So I can actually share this out to technical and non-technical users. And I can posit my ad hoc analysis about the state of things and the doability of what we're proposing to take on. And I think in that vein, couldn't be a better tool.
I was on mute. I think that leads in really well to talking about where we fit in terms of how we serve the different creators here. So maybe starting to talk on the right side of the screen here, just around the data scientists. That's definitely a core user of Zepl, right? Someone who's a code first user, or I guess we have this concept of code first now because a lot of the work or authoring, that you can do in DataRobot is going to be driven by the user interface. But we want to open that up to the more advanced developer or data scientist who's familiar with writing code first. So this is definitely our persona that we see the most inside of Zepl and getting the most value from it. The other users, so maybe just follow me around the circle here. We'll talk about data analysts next. You know, there's also a lot of room for data analysts inside of Zepl. If you're just doing some maybe lighter weight data exploration, or you're less familiar with coding languages, but you're familiar with SQL, and you want to be part of the shareable collaborative platform on top of Zepl, where everyone else is doing you know, the data science work. That's a really good fit for a lot of data analysts that are moving into this moving from SQL into the Python or the R world. And then we also see a lot of data engineers that are doing like data exploration and data cleansing on top of Zepl, especially with teams that have a lot of data now architected or being sent to cloud data warehouses. All three of these personas eventually will have some consumer, right? And so that kind of brings us to the top. We call it, you know, executives or business users, but most all of the analysis or data science that you're doing is going to have some sort of business requirement, and having your notebooks or the reports or the models that you build inside of your data science notebook needs to get out and go somewhere, right? And so whether that's a business user that you're helping solve a problem for or working together with, we want to make it really easy to be able to collaborate and have those users actually be able to see what you know, the teams are working on as they're working on it. So being able to deliver reports in Zepl is a huge benefit to being able to collaborate across all of these different users. So let's actually give you all a picture to work with. I'm gonna jump into a demo. I'm a pretty visual person, so I think it'll be helpful if we actually dive into Zepl and I can show you all, you know, all of what we're talking about. So the first thing within the demo that I'm going to share is really how to get up and running in Zepl very quickly. We take this self-service approach very seriously at Zepl. We want to make the work for the data scientists extremely easy to get started. So this is a cloud-based solution. There's no configuration needed on, you know, to tie into your AWS or your Azure or, you know, your yeah, whatever you know, cloud resources that you might be running. This is fully hosted and orchestrated for you. So that should save a lot of time to get started. We support multiple programming languages inside of all of our notebooks. So you can run Python, R, Scala code, as well as SQL directly inside of the notebook. And then in order to support all of these different features at an enterprise scale, or to really, you know, you can think of it as enterprise scale, or you can think of it just as, how do I make collaboration or sharing notebooks much easier than it is previously, where maybe I have a lot of files on my laptop and I upload them to a shared drive and then people download them and try and run them, right? We want to do away with that whole workflow and make it out of the box experience really easy for anyone to be able to run a notebook. And of course, do that in a very secure way. So we'll talk about the security features that are built around the platform. All right, so let me jump into, I'll share a different screen here and we can jump into a demo. So Elise, as I'm going, keep me honest with the time here. There's a lot of features in Zepl that I could show, but I want to be, you know, just conscious of our time and be able to leave room at the end for questions.
Great, Zach, I'd spend probably about 15 minutes on the demo. That'd be great. And then your attendees, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat and we will have a Q&A at the end.
Okay, great. All right, so when you all sign up for Zepl, you can sign up for a free trial, and we'll show you how to do that here at the end of the call. But when you sign up, you're going to see a screen that looks just like what I'm showing you here. You'll have some recent notebooks across the top. You might have a few spaces, and you always, where I always like to point people or users that are looking at the platform or getting started is right here, just starting with the add new. So thinking about, we're aware of the fact that notebooks have been around for a very long time in the open source space. There's tons of content in the public domain online that you can, you know, take advantage of. So we want to make it really easy for you to get started, right? Creating a notebook, super simple. Importing existing work. So If you have any Jupyter notebooks that you're working with, or Apache Zeppelin notebooks that you're working with, we can import those from a URL or just uploading a simple file. Okay. You may have different data sources that you want to connect up to. So if you're working with just standard JDBC connections like Postgres or MySQL, or if you're using Snowflake or S3, we also have a way to store just generic strings. So Gonzo had mentioned making API calls and working with APIs. We can do those in a secure way as well. I'll show you what this looks like when we actually dive into a notebook here in a second. All right, so imagine that I am new to Zepl. I'm a data scientist. I've worked with notebooks in the past, but I want to get started actually working on a notebook. Down the screen here, we have this concept called spaces. Spaces are like, you can think of them like shared folders, or think of them like projects. And there's a data set that we've been working on with actually some people that work at DataRobot and have an application in a model deployed in DataRobot. And I wanted to create a project in Zepl that actually interfaced with the deployed model in MLOps inside of DataRobot. So I've created this space here. It's called readmit projects because we're working with a data set looking at patients that may get readmitted into a hospital. And there's 3 different notebooks in here. Now, the really nice thing that we can do right off the bat is start to share this project, or share this space. We can share with different users, and we can also share this with different with everybody inside of the Zepl organization. Just to show you really quickly, we're taking sharing and access controls. So this will support the workflow to be able to share and collaborate, but it'll also help make sure that you do this in a very secure way. So there might be certain users that you only want to give access to the notebooks in this space. You may want to give them permissions to be able to clone these notebooks, or essentially fork the code that's in them. You may want to give, if you're working together on a specific notebook, multiple people could run it. And then, if you're going to be editing, you may want to provide modify privileges for the notebooks as well. So for this example, in this project, maybe I just want to lock it down and just give people the ability to clone these notebooks, because I've already spent a lot of time on them, and I don't think that my team needs to edit them. So let's go ahead and set up the clone privileges there. Okay. And then from here, I'm actually going to dive into one of these notebooks. Now you're going to be familiar probably with, if you've used notebooks in the past, you'll be familiar with the general concepts going on here. You have paragraphs that you can run either individually or in concert together, top to bottom. But something that is unique to Zepl is our notebook settings. And this is really where we start to save you a lot of time with troubleshooting technologies that you may have expertise in, but you also may just not have the time to get them set up. So every single notebook in Zepl will spin up a container, and that container can be scaled from 4 GB all the way up to 128 gigabytes. The reason why we stop at 128 gigabytes is because a lot of times you're probably used to using shared resources. Well, this is a resource that is completely dedicated to just the single notebook that you have here. As a user, you have the ability to scale these things, so you don't have to submit support tickets or IT or cloud engineering tickets to get these containers scaled. So that should help your rapid iteration and development in this code-centric approach. The second part of the settings that I want to call out is these images, and you can see that there's a few images here. Think of an image as all of the operating system packages. We run Linux on the back end, as well as all the libraries that you need and a consistent runtime between Python, R, and Spark for any notebook that may select this image. So the benefit here is that in the past, maybe you're familiar with committing notebooks to GitHub. When you download them, they're just a single file. This brings everything that you need in order to run the notebook across any user, whether they're technical or not, and has knowledge of these different technologies or not, and really just brings it into these two different settings. Okay, so this helps create a reproducible environment to make it super easy to run. We've added some images to support the DataRobot client libraries for Python and R, so we can select this and get started. Okay, so in this example that I'm going to run through, what we're doing here is we're gonna take a data set in Snowflake that we want to score against a model that's deployed in DataRobot. Just to share really quickly, here's what the model looks like. And a lot of what I've done here is essentially taken the code from this prediction API and actually implemented it into a notebook. So let's go ahead and get started. We'll spin up. You'll notice that the container is starting here. That will spin up. And once that code executes, we'll move on to the next step, which is actually getting our data set from Snowflake. This happens to be Snowflake, but I shared with you at the beginning of the call that there's other data sources that you can connect to. You can see that I have also connected a secret store. So this will support hold all of the DataRobot API keys and credentials that I have. And then just to share with you what our data sources look like, this makes a really super easy, repeatable way to connect to data. It's also very secure because you'll notice that there's no credentials stored in clear text in my notebook. You can also, we will also make sure that all of the role-based access that you've already set up inside of your data store is going to be honored. And we can even piggyback off of single sign-on, supporting multi-factor authentication for each user that might be running this notebook connecting to this data source. So a really powerful way to support data connections across your team. Okay, so I'm actually just going to pull back the last 1,000 rows of these patient records. You can see that I've got different patients, discharge disposition, so why they left the hospital, and so forth. And since the model that is deployed was already trained using DataRobot, what we can do is actually just read in this data into Zepl and make a prediction. I guess I scrolled a little bit fast here, but we support multiple programming languages. If you're an R user, you'll see that here's a quick example of getting data with R. It's actually very similar. The same sort of methodology is supported for R and Scala. If you use the Spark SQL notation, we can support that as well. And then for the users that maybe don't write code yet, of course we can support SQL directly inside of the notebooks. So there's a lot of tools in here to use for everyone. The next thing that I think is really powerful about Zepl is, we have a built-in visualization editor. So we can take these tables and really quickly convert them into different charting types. Here's a Plotly chart that we can set up. Maybe I want to just look at the different disposition types and how many patients maybe were discharged for different reasons. So, just a quick example of a really powerful UI-based charting engine here. But of course, if you want to write code and you want to do this through supported libraries like matplotlib and so forth, feel free to do so. So continuing down the example, I'm going to just clean up my data set, drop a few things. So this is kind of the pre-processing part of the data before we actually make our prediction. And then this last step, we're going to actually make a prediction into DataRobot's deployment, or the model that was deployed. We'll send in 10 records and to get 10 predictions back. And so let me go ahead and run this. And if the demo gods are with me today, then this will update our prediction results here inside of this last paragraph. Okay, so now we can look at, based off the data that we had in Snowflake, maybe that was new data that came in live. We can actually score that data right here inside of the notebook, maybe looking at why or what probability a patient is predicted to be readmitted into the hospital. From there, you can download data. The next things that you might want to do is actually publish these results to a public URL. So we can open up and share individual paragraphs through a public link, or you can even publish these notebooks to be publicly available, right, and share maybe in your Slack channels, intranet, and so forth to turn these into kind of dashboard look and feel. And then, you may also want to schedule notebooks to run, and that's fully supported here in Zepl. So we can set up, daily runs of this to any time let's run this daily so that the new data that's in Snowflake, we can get new predictions for, on a recurring basis. All right. I'm going to go ahead and pause here. There's actually a ton more that I could share with you around version control, how that works in Zepl, how we can save code snippets inside of the notebooks and so forth and reuse these things. But before I go on, it looked like there was some activity in the chat. So let's check and see if there's questions.
Sure. And Zach, if you want to just go over to the last slide for a moment, in case folks want to try Zepl for themselves. We have a URL for you to go to. You can go to this bit.ly URL, and we've set up a specific free trial for DataRobot prospects and users, where you can get 1,000 free Zepl credits. So feel free to try that out for yourself. And then as far as questions, yes, we did just get a question. Can you elaborate on how to share codes and visualizations with other team members?
Yeah, definitely. It's a great question. So I had mentioned a few at the end there. And there's definitely a few different ways that you can share in Zepl. One is through inside of the Zepl platform. So if you want to invite other team members into Zepl, you can share read-only notebooks or share notebooks for them to be able to run themselves. A common use case of that is a data science team that is working with a customer facing or maybe customer support, customer success team. And you have you have notebooks that the customer success team needs to run on their own anytime that they're on the phone with a customer. So some of our customers support that workflow. The other ways are through just sharing links. So I mentioned that there's these publishable links for each different notebook. If I were to share this with you, what this will do is show you a view-only version of this notebook here. So you can kind of take your notebook, I shouldn't say kind of, you can take your notebook and immediately turn it into a viewable project or more of a dashboard type result. I hope that helps answer the question there. And one thing too that may be confusing or maybe wasn't explicitly said is Zepl doesn't charge by user. So you can invite as many users as you want to the Zepl platform to collaborate on the work that you're doing. The only time that we charge is for container usage. So when you spin up a container, you get charged, but when you spin it down, say I want to shut this down, then I'm no longer being charged and I can have as many users in here as I want.
Awesome. Thank you, Zach. Another question, do I need DataRobot to get access to Zepl and vice versa?
Switch back here. Yeah, good question. I'll take that one. You do not need DataRobot. You do not need a DataRobot account to get access to Zepl. You can sign up for free on the Zepl.com website. You can use this link here to get additional free credits. And I know that DataRobot also, you can sign up for free trials of DataRobot as well, independently of Zepl.
Great, thank you. Another question is, I have existing Jupyter notebooks that are working with the DataRobot APIs. Can I use those notebooks in Zepl?
Yeah, you can. And hopefully the example that I shared with you was a good one and resonated because that's exactly what we were doing in the notebook that I had just shared. So if you're working with the Python or the R client libraries, you can import those using a pip install or install packages command, depending on what language you're using. And then you'll be able to take advantage of all of those, all of the functions that you're using in those APIs in the scripts or notebooks that you have running locally.
Great. And then you just mentioned Python and R. What other languages does Zepl support?
Yeah, we support SQL as well as Scala on top of Spark. Every single container that spins up will have access to all of those different languages: Python, R, Spark, so Scala, as well as SQL.
Excellent. And then we've got one last question, which is, do you support large data sets?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'd be interested in who asked that and would be happy to dive deeper into that use case. One of the reasons why I shared with you the integrations between Snowflake and Zepl, for example, we connect to BigQuery as well as Redshift and any using a JDBC driver to MySQL, Postgres databases. Zepl does not want to be your data warehouse. We want to integrate with it because those data warehouses are going to process data the best. And then when we bring it back into Zepl to do any sort of analysis in memory, we can either do that in a single threaded environment, but we can also run Zepl in a distributed environment using distributed Spark clusters as well. So we really have a lot of flexibility to be able to handle large and small data sets. So thanks for the question. Yeah, that's a good one. Excellent.
Great. So it doesn't look like we have any other questions. Thank you so much to both Gonzo and Zach for this awesome information. If anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out to them directly at the emails that we have here on the screen. And have a great rest of your day, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Gonzo.
Take care.